Let's face it, the church has never been good at math. And this story proves it. Think about it. $5,000, but they couldn't count the women and children. Five loaves, 2 fish. But 2 chapters later, it's 4,000, and it's 7 loaves and a few fish. And they were trying to figure up in their heads how much it would cost to feed a multitude. And when the multitude was fed, it didn't equal out. There were all these baskets of leftovers. 12 baskets of leftovers. But 2 chapters later, it was 7 baskets of leftovers. I can't figure out the math here. Can you? And to be honest with you, I always get it mixed up. Was it 5 loaves and 2 fish, or was it 5 fish and 2 loaves? Do you have trouble remembering that? Because to me, I would rather have more fish and less bread. But some people are big bread eaters. 5 loaves, 2 fish. 5,000. Not counting women and children. How much does it cost? How do you feed all of these people? And when we think we've done a good job, then there's all these leftovers. The church has never been good at math. We're still not. We're still asking the same questions. Maybe this story is a parable. Maybe it's a metaphor of the church today. Because here we are, still in the wilderness, a deserted place, surrounded by people who have needs that are overwhelming to us. And like the disciples of Jesus, our answer is usually, hey, send them away. It's not our problem. They should have known better. Why didn't they all pack a lunch? Common sense would tell you, take care of yourself. Pack your own lunch. Why should we be responsible for them? How many are there? We still ask in committee meetings and finance meetings, how much is it going to cost? That's a fair question. We have to do the math. And sometimes it just doesn't quite figure out. How are we supposed to meet the needs of a hurting and needy and desperate and hungry and lost world? We add up volunteers, servants, ministers, staff, membership, offerings. We add it all up. And it just doesn't quite figure. But what we have left out of the equation is what the disciples left out of the equation. The presence of a living God. With us and for us. A God who is able to empower us to do what we could not do. A God of great compassion. A God who is able to take a little and make it much. That's what we keep forgetting. That's what we leave out of this mathematical equation. This X factor, this unknown. This is an important story. It's the only miracle story of Jesus that finds its way in all four Gospels. Now think of the miracles of Jesus recorded in the Gospels, but this is the only one that is present in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And only in John's Gospel do you find that the source of the 5 loaves and 2 fish is a little boy. I've often wondered, why did he give up his lunch? Maybe he didn't know any better. Simple-minded child. Children are generous to a fault. Why didn't the others mention that? Why wasn't it important? I read a commentary years ago that suggested perhaps this miracle came about that as that little boy offered his lunch of 5 loaves and 2 fish, that it motivated others who were holding back to do the same. And maybe when they saw the little boy offering his lunch, that they reached into their backpacks and started pulling out food as well. I don't know. Either way, it's a miracle. Either way, it's a miracle. That all of those people's needs were met when it seemed impossible. So this is about more than loaves and fish. It's about more than one meal. It's about more than one group of people, whether it's 5,000 or 4,000, whether it's 5 loaves and 2 fish or 7 loaves and a few fish, whether it's 12 baskets of leftover or 7 baskets of leftover. It's about much more than that. It's about the difference in how we see ourselves and how we see our world and how God sees us and our world. This story is about how we can do nothing without God. But with God, and God working in us and through us, our world can be changed. And that's the gospel. That is the good news. I was reading a story the other day about a little-known saint, Marcella of Rome. 4th century, this beautiful young lady grew up in a very prominent Roman family. She had everything. Good education, beauty, supportive family, and her mother was a very devout Christian who taught her the importance of the disciplines of prayer and meditation and the study of the scriptures as she had. She married a wealthy man. Her life was set. She would never need for a single thing. 7 months after the wedding, her husband died, leaving her a young widow with a fortune. She had the opportunity to marry again to an even wealthier man, but she refused. Instead, she opened her mansion to the weary traveler, to the poor, to the homeless, to the weak. She took her fortune and she fed the hungry. And she convinced some of her wealthy friends to do the same. And her home became a haven, a place of refuge. And the exquisite, elaborate gowns that filled her closets were sold and replaced with simple brown dresses. And they became known as the Brown Dress Society. They lived a life of piety and simplicity. Caring for others. And when she was in her 70s, the Goths invaded Rome and pillaged it, and they had heard of the great wealth and position of Marcella. And so they came to her mansion, demanding her jewels and her money. And she said, "I don't have it." "Where is it?" they demanded. She said, "My wealth is in the stomachs of the poor and the hungry. You won't find it in a purse. My wealth is in the stomachs of the poor and the hungry." And they didn't believe her. They beat her and they tortured her mercilessly. And she died. And in the Catholic Church and the Eastern Orthodox Church, she is known as Saint Marcella. I think she still lives. I think she lives in you. She could. She could still live among us if we would follow the example. If we would have the compassion of Christ. That when we see the needy, the distraught, the lost, the hungry, the mentally and physically ill, when we see those who are chained to the addictions of alcohol and drugs, when we see battered and abused children and women, when we see the needs of our world, if we would stop trying to do the math and just start believing that even if we have little, that our God can make it much. Do you really believe that? Let us pray. Compassionate God, stir our hearts. Open our hands and our hearts and our minds to the world around us. Take us, O God, and use us for your glory. Free us from the love of self. Help us in all of our mathematical additions and equations to always factor in you. In the name of Christ. Amen.